The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So, to them, Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So, he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my hired workers have more than enough to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now, the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I ever disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You know, I think one thing that is overlooked when we hear this familiar gospel is that it is really about faith. And it confronts us with the cost of having faith in God. Faith does not come cheap. What about the younger son? He was in such desperate straits that the only way out was to go back to his father and plead for mercy. And mercy for him meant asking for the only form of acceptance that might be able to be viewed as just. In other words, I have offended you so terribly, I cannot accept your forgiveness. But can you at least hire me as you would one of the contract workers that helps you, that works in your field? What he was asking of his father was to do basically the same thing that the landowner did in that foreign country when he sent him to feed the pigs. Treat me like one of your hired hands. Now, what he received was unexpected. And the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, if we were in the position of that younger son, would we be able to accept that father's overwhelming love and generosity and forgiveness? And the reason why I say this is because as a priest, I have been hearing confessions for nearly 50 years. And I'm not violating the seal of confession when I say that many, many people come unable to allow God to be merciful to them, because they are carrying around a burden of sin that they feel is so awful that they cannot forgive themselves and therefore cannot accept God's forgiveness. To put it another way, it takes faith in a loving and merciful and forgiving God to be able to accept his forgiveness. And so we need to pray if we are in a situation like the prodigal son. We need to pray, Lord, give me the faith to accept your love and your mercy, even towards me, a miserable sinner. Now, the other side of that is the older brother. And how often are we scandalized at the thought of God's mercy toward those whom we think do not deserve forgiveness and mercy? Not, of course, recognizing that none of us deserve what God gives us. It is all gift. And so, we so often, like that elder brother, can't bring ourselves to have faith in God's good judgment in regard to other people. How can you forgive that terrible person they should be punished for what they do. And we, in our lack of faith, tend to be unrelenting in our really refusal to accept the God who does love and forgive. So there's two sides to this kind of faith. And maybe we need to pray to be able to put our trust, our faith in God as He is, rather than in God as we want Him to be. The kind of faith that expects God to do what we want and to be the kind of God we want Him to be. That's easy, that's cheap, and that's false. Our biggest test of faith is to let God be God, even when God's love and forgiveness challenges our way of thinking how things should be, whether regarding ourselves as miserable sinners we are, or regarding others whom we also know to be miserable sinners. None of us deserving forgiveness, but God being willing to lavish forgiveness and compassion on all of us.